Give him assurance and confidence, Lord. Bring the right words to him as he gives this and answers any questions that might be there. And we just commit all this into your hands, knowing that everything we do, Father, is for you. We are your hands, your feet, your lips. We tell forth your word. And so I just pray you'll bless him very mightily, even as a result of his obtaining his doctorate. So we just commit this time today in your hands and ask all of this in the name of our Lord Jesus. Amen.
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 Alex, do you have any questions before you start?
Nope, no questions.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right. I am muting my mic unless I need to turn it on.
I will do the same so I don't interfere with the sound.
Okay. I will share my screen. Please maybe unmute yourself quickly to let me know if you can see it.
Yes.
Yes,
Great.
we can see it. It looks good.
Good. Great. Wonderful. All right. Well, to start, I want to thank you both, Dr. Potea and Dr. Borit, for just being so available, so attentive, and helpful throughout this whole process. I hear horror stories all the time online about, PhD candidates and their bad, experiences with the people in their committee and their chair, and I have not had that experience, so I'm thankful for that. The title of my presentation is Sexual Scripts and Conflict: Does Religiosity Moderate the Relationship Between Pornography Use and Permissive Sexuality? And I jumped the gun and already acknowledged you both, but I want to say it again. You both have been incredibly helpful, and also to my editor, Megan Tatro. She was outstanding. She's not here, but I just still wanted to give her a shout out. Wanted to open by providing some background context to this study. Pornography use, this should be no surprise to anyone, but it's widespread and it's growing, particularly in religious communities. And some studies even indicate in highly populated Christian areas, pornography use is sort of mushrooming, at least since COVID. And what we've noticed, did you guys lose me? Okay.
No, we lost the PowerPoint.
We lost the video, yeah.
Or
the screen, yeah.
How we doing now? We good?
Yep, back.
All right, if that happens again, we'll deal with it then. One thing researchers have seen is that pornography, both frequency and also the types of pornography viewed, are impacting people's attitudes toward sexuality, the attitudes towards relationships. For instance, Wright in 2023 found longitudinal associations between pornography use and content congruent outcomes. In other words, things that are found in pornography and outcomes that are similar to that was not based on like a reverse causality. In other words, it's not that people who have these permissive sexual or even risky sexual behaviors just watch more pornography, but Wright actually was able to demonstrate that there was a legitimate attitudinal change because of pornography viewing. And that's consistent with a lot of research. Grubbs and Perry talk about how religious individuals experience greater distress, particularly due to the moral incongruence. Obviously, like Christian people who are viewing pornography, because they have moral qualms with it, and because it's against their ideal view of sexuality, they tend to have greater feelings of shame and feelings of like dissonance, where they're like living inconsistently with their values. Now, Grubbs and Perry present that as a sort of confounding variable that should contradict the addiction hypothesis. That's kind of the tone of their writing. And I don't agree with that. I think there's not as much support to say it's confounding, and I'll get to that later. But it still highlights that in Christian circles, the distress is higher because of that added element of moral failure that people experience. With regard to things like permissive sexuality, regards to things like attitude changes, religiosity has been shown to be protective. Mainly, like, for example, Hardy and colleagues in 2013 found that religiosity tends to make people more self-regulatory or implement social control. Because you have a population, usually there's accountability, a person is a part of a church, maybe the home is structured in such a way to preclude or prevent pornography access. And so religiosity was shown to moderate or rather to protect against exposure and the attitude change that comes with pornography, which these things altogether, these 5 points and then some of the ones I'll say next, serve as like the backdrop that explain why this is of interest for me. In 2023, Wright talks about how pornography offers a quote unquote non-traditional sexual script. That should be obvious to anybody who understands and who has read content analyses of the types of things pornography propagates and even the wider culture, even non-pornographic sexual media. And these non-traditional sexual scripts, when consumed, impact the attitudes, and not only the attitudes, but the behavior of individuals, which ties into what Simon and Gagnon discovered and sort of developed, which is sexual script theory. Sexual script theory refers to the socialization effects of sexual media at an individual level, interpersonal level, and cultural level. And so that's highly salient for this work. And the reason for that is because in line with sexual script theory, researchers have explored how pornography, which is a very unique form of sexual media, because it's explicit, it's widely accessible, it could be accessed anonymously. Pornography includes a lot of scripts that would be considered problematic. Fritz and Paul, for example, examined the content of popular pornography. They did a content, analysis, and they found consistent themes of objectification and violence, and with significantly greater violence being dealt toward Black performers. So if it was a Black woman or a Black man, violence and objectification and degradation was consistently more targeted toward those groups. In line with the sexual scripts and in line with the religious population and how that becomes important here as well, is Whitehead and Perry, they examined the Google searches in the Bible Belt, and in multiple states in the Bible Belt, and they wanted to see how often pornography was being searched. And what they found was that there was more than is reported by the people in the Bible Belt. There are more searches. So there's like a discrepancy between searches and what is reported. And so it almost indicates like perhaps religious individuals or people in highly religious populations are underreporting how much pornography they're searching, viewing, accessing, which would make sense considering what I said earlier about moral incongruence and shame. And lastly, I think Rasmussen and Kohut, they call specifically for future research. They did a study in 2017. They wanted future researchers to explore, this is the key word, the implications of dissonance for the many connections, positive and negative, that research has observed with the consumption of pornography. In other words, they want to see, okay, what happens when there's dissonance in the individual, whether it's based on their existing set. Oops, did I lose that again? Sorry, working on it. I don't know what's going on, but thankfully we can get it right back up. Okay, we good?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. They wanted to explore dissonance. And so, for instance, Christians have a sexual script that is going to be dissonant with the sexual scripts found in popular pornography. For instance, Christians believe in monogamous, opposite sex, marital sex being the ideal. And the pornographic script or the norms found in pornography are obviously not exclusive to that. And so that dissonance is what the present study is seeking to assess. And so the purpose is to assess whether or not religiosity moderates the relationship between pornography frequency and permissive sexual attitudes. The theoretical framework that I am using is within sexual script theory. There is the sexual script acquisition, activation, and application model, or in short, the 3 a.m. This was created by Paul J. Wright, who is a prolific researcher in media effects literature, particularly in the pornography world. In addition to that, as a theoretical basis, I assume historic orthodox biblical sexual ethics to represent and to be what I mean by biblical sexual ethics or Christian sexual attitudes. This is a brief breakdown of the 3 a.m. And to explain very briefly, the acquisition of a sexual script, and by the way, a sexual script simply refers to the norms that are embedded in a interaction. So for instance, when you watch a movie and you see a couple go to dinner and then after dinner go home together, that's presenting a subliminal or subtextual norm about what should follow dinner or what should precede going home or what kinds of activities are socially appropriate. And so when we view sexual media and when somebody views pornography, they are sort of internalizing or being exposed to all sorts of primed attitudes about sex. And the 3 a.m. posits that in addition to this, when a person repeatedly views these things, that originally sort of implanted sexual idea is then activated in the person, which then changes their expectations about sex and what is normal. And then lastly, application simply refers to the behavioral outpouring of that. So diving into the literature and what the literature says both about pornography use and sexual scripts. Sorry, this thing is in my way. Okay. An important part about pornography use that is all throughout the research is its tie to particularly risky sexual behavior in adults, in partners, but also in teenagers and adolescents and minors as well. So for instance, Marshall and Miller say that it seems likely that some individuals are more sensitive or prone to developing inappropriate or harmful scripts. That's part of the thing that I'm trying to explore is what types of existing views that a person has would make them prone or susceptible to internalizing the scripts found in pornography. Jovanovski and Tyler ran a thematic analysis of men, and they were reporting an influence of pornography on their sexual attitudes. And a consistent amount of them reported one of the themes in the analysis was that pornography encouraged them to objectify women and to belittle them. And that part of the script, not just about sex, but also about women, was to view them in a purely sexualized and objectified fashion. Importantly, pornography viewing has increased since COVID-19. For example, Messer Back reports, and this is remarkable, in January of 2020, a popular pornographic website reported in just a span of 30 days in January, 9.1 million searches on their website, not just for pornography, but specifically for coronavirus-related pornography, specifically for COVID-19-related theme. And so just imagine what the numbers on just general pornography were during that time. And so it's widespread, it's growing, and COVID has only mushroomed it. Wright, Paul J. Wright has consistently emphasized the 3 a.m. model as being inadequate. He's tested the model, he's tested it longitudinally in a cross-sectional fashion, and it's shown to be an adequate explanation for what pornography does to an individual in terms of their attitudes and their norms. Wright referred to the existence of pre-existing stronger scripts that may prevent new scripts from being activated, however. Now, this is important. If pornography leads to the development of the pornographic sexual script, it'd be really nice to know, especially given how ubiquitous pornography is, if there's anything that could interrupt that, if there's anything that could buffer that, if there's anything that could change or affect that or prevent that from occurring, especially if some of the things that pornography influences people to do is risky or against sexual health literature, or in terms of a Christian individual, immoral. And lastly, another content analysis ran by Vera Gray and colleagues in the UK, which was the largest study of its kind. They examined over 150,000 pornography titles across 4 of the landing pages of major popular pornographic websites. They found that 1 in 8 titles featured a reference to sexual violence. And of that group that featured the references to sexual violence, the majority were incestuous. And so these are the types of scripts, norms that an individual, when they're just perusing pornography, not even searching for it, just on the landing page, is going to be exposed to. Next, Christians, they view less pornography in general than the general public, than the non-religious pornography viewing public, but they tend to feel more shame about it. And this comes from Grubbs and Perry and their exploration of moral incongruence, but also from Christian writers like Michael J. Cusick, who has written on this topic from both a biblical and a clinical perspective. And shame is considered one of the biggest barriers to getting over a pornography addiction. Donovan and colleagues indicate, and they show that pornography is still largely a male problem. In their study they surveyed data spanning 10 years of pornography trends in Sweden, and they found that there was still significantly more boys who were using pornography in comparison to girls, and that held over the entire 10-year period. They assessed different points of time, and it still held. Weiss in 2022 integrated, and this is a good idea of the trend in Christian academia when it comes to this topic. And I guess, add to this a little, but Weiss integrates theological and scientific or neuroscientific insights. A good example is when he says that when people become aroused, they become flooded with neurochemicals, and then later talks about that this process is an important element of God's ordered creation. So you're seeing a lot of Christians who are trying to attack this topic by integrating biblical theological insights with the neuroscientific insights, whereas maybe 30, 40 years ago, it was more about social cleanliness and more about preventing the perversion of society. Now there's much more integration of the best of neuroscientific literature. And then, as alluded to in the introduction, Hardy et al., they found that mediating factors like social and control and self-regulation were involved in religious youth being less exposed to pornography. They piloted actually two of the measures that I use in this study. And they found that the function of self-regulation and social control worked similarly for both men and women, suggesting that religiosity can be a ubiquitous influence on anybody and anybody's interaction with sexual themes, not just men. Okay, my research questions. I want to know, do Christian males who view pornography frequently endorse more permissive sexual scripts than those who don't? My second is, I want to know if Christian males who view pornography frequently and report high religiosity endorse permissive sexual attitudes. And then lastly, I want to see if religiosity moderates the relationship between pornography use and permissive sexual attitudes. The null hypothesis is that there won't be any difference between these groups. There won't be high and low religiosity males, high and low pornography frequency males will not impact either pornography viewing or permissive sexual attitudes. My first hypothesis is that Christian males who view pornography frequently will endorse more permissive sexual attitudes than those who view it less frequently. This study does not have a control group of non-viewers. It is an observation of how attitudes change with frequency increasing, not dichotomously with just viewing. Christian males who view pornography frequently but report high religiosity, this is my second hypothesis, will endorse less permissive sexualities than those who report low or moderate religiosity. So here I'm positing an interaction of religiosity and pornography frequency, and I'm saying that if religiosity is high, even if pornography frequency is the same, permissive sexual attitudes will still be lower because of the high religiosity. And then lastly, similar to hypothesis 2, but different statistically, is I want to see if there is a moderation effect based on a moderation analysis. And this is the sort of theoretical model for that. Moderation is testing the magnitude of a relationship between two variables. I'm not saying that pornography frequency goes through religiosity as, say, in a mediating relationship. I'm saying religiosity impacts the magnitude of that relationship. Okay. I'm running a quantitative cross-sectional survey. It is a quasi-experimental design because I am running statistical tests. I am doing testing an independent variable with a dependent variable, but I am not running an experiment with individuals. I am using self-reported data. I used Process and SPSS 26 to run a moderation analysis, and along with linear regressions and t-tests. You will see that throughout the presentation. And then lastly, a 2x3 analysis of variance, which is a good way of, it's a non-moderation test of an interaction. Because a moderation is simply an interaction, but a 2x3 tests a non-moderation type of interaction, which proved to be relevant in this case. Using G-Power, a sample of 68 was deemed sufficient. I recruited 102 individuals through social media and through an online survey platform called Prolific. Individuals were compensated, and after missing data was excluded, the final sample was 89, which still was well above the approved amount. These are the materials that I use, and I'm going to explain what each one is and what they measure. These are the variables, which I will also explain. First, with religiosity, I'm combining scores from two scales, the religious internalization and the religious involvement scale. And they're going to be transformed into a z-score and then coded as high, moderate, and low. And this is so we can see the differences between groups. The pornography use scale includes two subscales, both frequency and problematic use. And so higher scores on the scale indicate greater objective and subjective frequency of pornography use because it assesses how often they view it, but also how bad they feel about it. Permissive sexuality uses the permissive subscale of the brief sexual attitude scale, and higher scores indicate more permissive sexual attitudes. An example of a permissive sexual attitude is like, sex is totally okay with no strings attached. I don't need to be married to have sex. That's permissive, whereas biblical sexual ethics would go more in the direction of less permissive or constrictive. These are my control variables that I put into the moderation analysis. To be honest, none of them necessarily proved relevant, but it's important to note. These are the main data analyses, linear regression and t-test to test the main effect of pornography, a moderation analysis, and then the 2x3 ANOVA to observe non-moderation interaction. This is important. Data were assessed for normality, and though some of the tests, the normality test, showed significant results, which is not what you want, the skewness and kurtosis ranges fell within an appropriate range to be appropriately used. So I thought it'd be important to measure that, and all the measures met the appropriate alpha scores for use. Okay, now let's get to the results. First, most individuals in this study ranged in the 31 to 50-year-old age range. There were mostly male, which isn't surprising because it's only measuring men, but there's one non-binary person there. Mostly straight white men are featured in this study. Mostly married, and most had bachelor's degrees, although there was some variance there. You know, every single degree was represented, which I found interesting. Religious, now when I say religion, I mean specifically, and I did ask about other religious views because I wanted to make sure that everybody involved was a Christian male. But in this sample, it's a pretty equal, it seems like a pretty equal separation of Protestant, Catholic, and non-denominational, with Protestants taking up the majority. This is the religious acts. This was included as a qualitative measure for religiosity, and it's a part of the religious internalization scale. And really, this is here so that I can see in a qualitative fashion if the people responding actually engage in religious practices. In fact, some of the respondents that I deleted, it was because they provided either a nonsense answer to this or they didn't answer it. Like some people just put gibberish in the text box, and I deleted that because I wanted to make sure that as best I could that we were dealing with people who were actually involved as Christians. So here is everybody can see this, right? Okay. Here is a breakdown of, well, now you can't. Here's a breakdown of the, sorry, I don't know what's going on here. Okay. This is a breakdown of the groups. If you recall, I did splits for religious internalization, religious involvement, and then the Z-score measuring the low and moderate high religiosity scores. High religiosity and low religiosity are the sort of boundaries, but the moderate score was to see was to round out the data point so that when comparing pornography use and permissive sexual attitudes later, I could get more of a reflective view, because the median split itself risks a little bit of arbitrariness, and I'll explain that in the limitations. But as you can see, religious internalization was pretty split. Religious involvement, actually, the majority of people in the study reported low religious involvement, at least based on the median split. And then most people, in terms of the Z-score split, would fall into the moderate range of religiosity. Religious involvement, now this is church attendance, church practices, frequency of Bible reading, things like that, consistently was correlated with lower pornography frequency, less permissive sexual attitudes, greater problematic pornography use. In other words, the more religiously involved you were, the more likely you were to feel bad about viewing pornography, and greater religious internalization. Interestingly, religious internalization alone did not significantly correlate with any non-religiosity variable, which was one of the surprises of this study that I'll explain later. Christians who scored higher on religious internalization endorsed less permissive sexual attitudes. An independent samples t-test revealed a significant difference in sexual attitudes between Christians with high and low religious internalization. Christian males who internalized their religious beliefs reported less permissive sexual attitudes than those who scored lower on internalization. Next, a significant difference between those with high and low religious involvement was found. Christians who were more involved in their religious practices tended to endorse less permissive sexual attitudes than those who were less involved. A regression analysis yielded similar results, except religious involvement significantly predicted sexual attitudes, while religious internalization did not alone predict sexual attitudes. Again, that was the interesting point. Involvement seemed to be more salient in this study than internalization. In summary, higher religious involvement, lower pornography frequency, higher religiosity in general, based on the Z-score, less permissive sexual attitudes. Most participants, when assessing for the pornography use, which really focuses on frequency, because problematic pornography use actually was not influential. It didn't change anything by itself. And so pornography frequency is actually the most salient feature of pornography use in this study. And that's consistent with other studies that talk about how frequency, and it's also consistent with the 3 a.m. because exposure and repeated exposure is what causes those socialization effects, not so much how convinced one is at first exposure. And most of the sample was low in their pornography use, lower based on the median cutoff. And this is going to have implications later and explain some of the final results, I think. Research question 1 was answered in this way. A linear regression model revealed, consistent with hypothesis 1, that frequency of pornography use predicted more permissive sexual attitudes. The more pornography you viewed, the more permissive your sexual attitudes are. In terms of correlative, those with higher pornography frequency had more permissive sexual attitudes. Those who viewed it more frequently scored higher. And thus hypothesis 1, which predicted that there would be a relationship here, a connection between frequency of pornography viewing and permissive sexuality, is supported. A 2x3 ANOVA reveals a significant interaction, and this was probably the most interesting finding of this study, is that pornography use and religiosity did interact such that as religiosity increases, permissive sexual attitudes decreased even while pornography use remained high. So if you notice the highlighted portions, the means consistently go lower as the group means, that is, as religiosity increases. And so even though, and so it's consistent with prior studies that did sort of autoregressive longitudinal analyses of different religious and non-religious viewers of pornography and their sexual attitudes, particularly permissive or non-permissive. And consistently, as religiosity increases, permissive attitudes lower, even as pornography use remains high. And so this provided support for hypothesis 2, and I would say partial support for hypothesis 3, but I caveat that because I get to that part in the limitations. This is a visual graph of that relationship, and you can see visually that there is the consistent trend of the opposite direction of religiosity and permissive sexual attitudes. The moderation analysis did not yield a significant effect. So hypothesis 3 was unsupported. Religiosity did not moderate the relationship between permissive sexual attitudes and pornography use. And this was my main hypothesis, or my third hypothesis, and it was unsupported. There was main effects both of religiosity and of pornography use on permissive sexual attitudes, but when I ran the moderation analysis, it was insignificant. Okay. Findings for my first hypothesis are consistent with existing trends. For instance, I'm going to butcher this name, but I'm assuming that's Datches and Turan in 2021. They studied pornography use and the heterosexual script and hookup occurrence. The heterosexual script is like, I guess you'd call it, one thing that could include it is like the Playboy script. And they found that compulsive pornography consumption was associated with endorsement of that, which in turn led to more hookups. And so hookups, and at least in the way that they defined it, is technically risky because you're talking about having usually unprotected sex with people that you've just met. And so they found that there was a mediating factor showing that the heterosexual script was something that was internalized through pornography, which then that's an example of activation, and then application is the hookup occurrence. Findings for my second hypothesis are consistent with Wright. Wright explored he compared religious and non-religious viewers and non-viewers of pornography. And the way it went was religious viewers had less permissive sexual attitudes than non-religious viewers and non-viewers. So in a way, religiosity kind of kept a ceiling on the permissive sexual attitudes, even though like Christian viewers of pornography had less permissive sexual attitudes than non-believing non-viewers. So in that case, religiosity provided sort of a buffer, a ceiling, or what I would say a moderating effect, or what could be interpreted as such. And so they're consistent, but they should be interpreted with caution because of the median cutoff. The median cutoff, when you have a continuous variable and you pick the median number and then cut everybody above that is high and everybody below that is low, while it can be interesting, it can also risk arbitrarily separating groups that are not that different. And so while there is something to be said about the interaction, and I do think there's something happening there, I still add this just, for one, for the sake of ethics, and two, inconsistent with Hayes in 2017 when he writes on mediation and moderation. He specifically asks for caution with that, because a lot of times researchers will fail in their moderation and then run the ANOVA to then claim that a moderation is occurring, and that's not good practice. And then I would say my findings for hypothesis 3 call for a larger sample size. It was hard, especially because the majority of my sample was low in pornography use. It's going to be hard to test an effect of pornography use and religiosity or interaction when one of the variables is already very low. It's like we kind of need a person to be viewing pornography to see if the scripting effect is taking place or being prevented from taking place. And so I think that was one limitation, was the sample size. Even though it was an adequate size, it could probably benefit from a longitudinal and much larger sample. Two surprises that I'd like to mention. Religious internalization was less pivotal, which was surprising. The 3 a.m. based expectation is that internalized religiosity would be one of the most salient features in changing permissive sexual attitudes. But it wasn't in this study as important as religious involvement. However, it's important to note that the limitations of the religiosity measure, it didn't measure religious sexual attitudes. It just measures religiosity and religious involvement. And so there may have been some information missed about internalizing religious sexual values because it's asking more general questions about religion. And we should not assume that just because somebody goes to church, that they even have a strong understanding of what they believe about sex, because there are many cases, and some sociological literature has reported this, where sexual theology is not often presented in the church. And I would say it's somewhat inconsistent with the 3 a.m. based hypothesis of the pre-existing scripts protecting, because it sort of indicates that the pre-existing script was not as strong. But I would say there were still strong correlational and interactive elements. So I would only say it is somewhat inconsistent. I wouldn't say it challenges the hypothesis. I think the limitations of my study are probably more explanatory. Boy, I'm having a double time here. 1 second. Okay, I've already kind of assessed some of these limitations. I would say the most important one is the median cutoff, is when you take a continuous variable and you assess a high and low group based on a median, you risk arbitrariness, which is what Hayes argues against in his work. The sample may not have been large enough. I would say the permissive sexual attitudes, as well as the religious-based elements, permissive sexual attitudes did not have specifically religious-based elements to compare to. And so we really, based on the measures that exist, though they are valid measures, we would have been helped by something that assessed specifically biblical or religious sexual views. And then the obvious, with a study of this kind, social desirability bias is always going to be a risk, because even though we ensured the anonymity of participants, and even though they signed an informed consent document that said that no one would have access to their name or any identifying information, they may be doing this on a home computer, they may be doing it on a phone, and they may be weary of reporting data on their pornography use, just in general. So there are some natural limitations that come with anything measuring sexual behavior, and especially in Christian population. Keep in mind the moral incongruence and proclivity towards shame there. Here are some of the things I think are significant. First, I think it adds to media effects literature. There's been a growing call for specifically religiosity, to be used as an intermediary variable. So like Ostrander in 2021 actually published a dissertation through Liberty, doing a moderation analysis using religiosity as a moderating variable. And Paul J. Wright wrote that the problem with religiosity is that it's too often used as a confound and a control, when it's more complex than that. It's probably mediating or moderating, not just confounding. And so I think this adds to that. It deepens our empirical understanding of trends. It affirms, one, that religiosity is correlated with and predictive of less pornography use. That's important to know. It kind of agrees with the studies that came prior that show the impact of religiosity and the different elements of religiosity on that. Two, pornography use and religiosity interacting significantly towards sexual outcomes. That is also an important feature, because it shows there's something there, like this could be improved upon and delved into, but clearly there is an interaction occurring. And it also shows about the uniqueness of pornography and its impact. In a totally Christian sample, pornography still showed signs of impacting sexual attitudes. That shows how powerful a sexual medium that it is, how powerful a learning medium that it is, just neurologically. And then my final point is, consistent with, for instance, existing research that talks about how parent-child communication about sex helps prevent risky sexual behaviors, I think researchers, even pastors and lay helpers, in educating people that are under them, whether they're mentees or they're congregants, about sexual health, about adaptive sexual behavior, about biblical sexuality, and presenting it as an ideal, it can help prevent perhaps some of the permissive attitudes from developing, in the same way that communication from a parent to a child tends to protect against internalizing the pornographic script in other ways. Questions?
Well, uh, great job in there, Alex. Very well done. So I'll go ahead and let Dr. Borat go first.
Yeah, well, first of all, good job, Alex. You got through a lot of information in a fairly short time, so you did a great job. Can you run back to your sample population slide for me a little bit, that pie chart? I just had a question I was going to ask you on that.
You mean this?
Yeah, there you go. So I was curious more than anything as to why did you end up with more of the 31 to 50 people versus, the other age groups? And I'm more interested in the younger age group. And is there a reason why, you would end up with that?
It was surprising to me too, especially because in existing research, like 18 to 35, and that's what I'm wondering too, because it's 31 to 50 and not like 35 to 55 or something. I wonder if that overweighted that category, because you see a lot of 18 to 35 groupings, at least demographically, and other studies that I've read. And so I think in me going 18 to 30, I wonder if I wonder if it would have been flipped if I just went 18 to 35. Because it was a little surprising to me as well.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of the question that prompted in my mind when you were talking about that is I wonder if your results would have been a little different if you had had that younger age group included, into that bracket. But who knows, right? It may not have been any different, but I was just curious as to why, if there was any reason that that age group was predominant. But
Yeah.
that's good. And that actually kind of leads me to my last question, really, and that is, you did a great job on everything. What would you do different? And I think I might know the answer to this one after your comments, but what do you think you'd do different in your study if you had to run it again?
I'd make it longitudinal and I'd include a bigger sample. I would, if I had it in my perfect world, I know this may be difficult with dissertation, in the process and the limited resources, but I would like to actually measure autoregressive longitudinal data with the same participants over time. To me, that's just the best way to measure that.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking more, not a longitudinal, but if you had to do the same study in
Yeah.
your, same length of time, barring, not wanting to graduate, what is that what you would still do different? Is just do
Maybe, I think I'd probably include, it's tough because there's a couple things I do. I may want to include obviously a larger sample, may want to include non-viewers of pornography, right? With Christian non-viewers of pornography to see if religiosity is changing in its effect based with pornography use, if there's something happening there. That would probably be the thing that I could do now immediately. Like that with this study, that could have probably been done. But I wanted to also it was like a choice I had because I did was thinking about doing either one of those, but then I thought, oh, but I kind of would like to see how Christian viewers of pornography differ. And that was interesting to me. But now looking back, especially after running it, actually probably would have benefited from having that, I guess, kind of like a control group, though not really, but kind of like that.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I was wondering about that as well as, you know, it's hard because I know you were trying to focus on how are people who claim to be Christians impacted by these scripts and everything. But
Right.
I just wonder if you kind of tainted your
Mm,
results a little bit
yeah.
by not going, into a broader, non-specific sample size group and just seeing
Mhm.
what came out of it. Because I think you might have been surprised a little bit by, the religiosity of a generic group, if you will, compared to that. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
just raised some good questions because I think it was a very intriguing study. And
Yeah.
like you pointed out earlier, churches today are becoming more um, amenable to talking about this subject,
Hmm.
especially your conservative church. And I think these kinds of studies are very important, to be talked about. And this is a great tool, I think, and I may even pick it up and use it to help convince and show people, here's what's going on, and here's what you need to be paying attention to. And I thought your results were, you're really good. One of the questions I had is what surprised you, but you answered that. And I think that kind of surprised me as well. So great job. I don't have any more questions, but you did a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Boret. I have a couple of questions, Alex, and Dr. Boret, feel free to jump in at any time. So actually, I'm looking at your PowerPoint right now. Let me see here. So in terms of geography, I'm trying to remember that info. I'm trying to remember if I have seen it or not. You know, I do a lot of dissertations here and at another school in California, but did you, in terms of geography, where did they come from?
So
Do you know?
all across the United States, but they did not provide specifics. I didn't have that in the survey, and I don't think Prolific included that. But it was all stateside participants.
Okay, very good. Let me see what else. I have written a couple of questions in here, a couple of comments. So, what did you enjoy the most during the process as you're collecting the data and as you're going through the study? What did you enjoy the most?
Yeah, I did not enjoy collecting the data. I enjoyed actually putting it into SPSS and running it. I enjoyed when the moderation effect came back insignificant. It felt like, okay, I'm doing like a real thing. Like I'm testing something real that can be wrong, which was actually exciting for me. So that part, when I was actually putting data in, running it, and seeing what came out, doing different tests, like, you know, testing things, getting creative with the types of tests run, that was probably the most fun that I had. I didn't think chapter 4 was going to be the most fun. I thought like every other chapter was going to be more fun, but that actually was the most fun I had, was actually doing the analyses.
Hey, very good.
Do you want me to put my PowerPoint back up?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
So let me see here. I don't have another question, but I do have a comment. So in the event you're looking to publish this, the sooner the better. So as you know, research becomes old. So when it's fresh, it's very important. But the more it stays in there, eventually it becomes older. So if you, by any chance, if you are looking to publish this, like officially, then do it ASAP.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dr. Coltia, that brings up a couple of good points too that I make sure I always mention to my students, and that is you can copyright your research. And I would highly recommend you do that. And then also find a couple of good research publication journals and get it published, you know, because like Dr. Coltia said, you know, this is fresh information and it's different enough in some respects that I think it would be worth, I think some journals would definitely pick it up and publish it. So yeah, that's a good point, Dr. Coltia.
Thank you, Dr. Boret. So Alex, I don't have other questions or comments right now. However, in a couple of minutes, I will have some additional comments, okay? And I'll be giving you some information. So basically, we have one option that we have here for myself and Dr. Boret is to approve with no revisions needed. So to approve it without asking you to make any revisions. The second option that we have is to provisionally approve with the condition that we are asking you to make some revisions to the manuscript. And the last one basically is not to approve and ask you to revise, rewrite eventually the entire document. And talking about that, I wanted to see if Dr. Boret, if you would like us, you and me, to confer in private or not.
Oh, I do not need to, Dr. Coltia. I am fine. I think he did a great job. I do not know of anything that I would feel strongly enough about to revise. I think he's captured everything in his limitations, assumptions, and, flagged as far as needing to do different. So I don't see any changes required to approve him.
Very good. You agree with the first option, to approve with no revisions?
Yes.
Okay. And I definitely agree with the first option. Alex, how do you pronounce your last name?
Castaneda.
Castaneva?
Castaneda or Castaneda.
Castaneda.
There you
I'm
go.
trying to pronounce it. Just forgive me if I'm mispronouncing it. But now you are Dr. Castaneda. Okay. So congratulations.
Yes, congratulations.
Congratulations.
I'm just going to call him Dr. Alex.
That's cool too. That's cool too.
Or
I go
Dr.
by
A,
Dr.
one of
C
the two.
because many people don't know how to pronounce it, and it's fine, but congratulations. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations. Great
Thank
job.
you. Thank you to you both.
You're welcome. You did a great job in here. Let me give you some information in here. We still need a couple of more minutes, okay? And after that, we'll conclude. So some information for you. Let's see here. So I'm going to complete the form and I'm going to submit it to Dr. Pifferi. So it's something what we do, okay? What I do myself. So just give us a few days and Dr. Pifferi is going to send you an email with instructions on how to submit the manuscript to the library. And if you want to go ahead and jot down this information, so the first step is I do something, I fill up a form, I send it to Dr. Pifferi. You don't have to worry about that. I do that myself. Dr. Pifferi is going to send you an email with instructions on how to submit your manuscript to the library. So there are a couple of other things before you submit to the library. I'm referring to the first page of your dissertation. You see in there where it says approved by, and it's my name and Dr. Boret's name in there on the first page. So I'm going to sign next to my name, and Dr. Boret is going to sign next to his. So we are going to send you back this page to you. So you have our signatures. But when you submit your manuscript to the library, do not include this one with our signatures. Our signatures are for you and for Dr. Pifferi, okay? And so don't submit our signatures to the library. And something else. In the event something jumps at you, some kind of misspelling, or you see something that is like a last minute situation that you need to adjust, to correct, you still can do it until you submit to the library. Once you submit to the library, it's going to get published that way, and it will be too late after that. So also Dr. Piferi is going to give you some info, okay, on making, well, first, if you are interested in attending the commencement,
I'll be there.
then she'll give you information on what are the steps and what to do in order to be there physically. So it's kind of, she's going to take over from here. So Dr. Piferi is going to take over. We will still be sending to you the first page with our signatures. You'll get it from me by tomorrow. You'll have it. You should have it. And I'm going to send it to you in such a way that you can copy it and put it on the document that Dr. Boret is going to send you. So you can have both of them on the same document. Dr. Boret, am I missing anything? Anything else from you?
No, I think you've got everything there. So I was just curious as to if any of the other people listening in wanted to say anything before we sign off. I see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 other people. So I'm assuming they're all your friends or family members.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of him. I'm his father.
Yeah, you have every right to be. You did a great job. Yeah.
I'm also his father. Congrats, bud. I love you. Congrats, man.
My best friend, ladies.
Congrats, Alex.
He's worked so hard, and we're extremely happy for him. And thank you both for such grace. And it's just a lot of emotions at the moment.
Yes, I know. It's almost harder on the family than it is the student.
Yes.
Yes.
Lots of prayer, constant prayer.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other questions for us, comments?
No, just thank you both. Thank you to everybody who's here. My wife is here as well, off camera, trying to lower her cries, and one of my best friends is here as well in support. And I'm so glad that they're here. It actually helped me to have them here. On my document, I dedicate the whole thing to Chloe, and in the same way I dedicate this to her and to my daughter. But no, I'm grateful. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Again, congratulations. Send me an email if you need anything else.
All right.
I will. I have some questions.
I'm signing off. So thank you again, both, and go forth and do good, Alex. Use what you've learned. May God use you and bless you mightily with it. So
thank you, Dr. Boret.
All right.
I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cloutier. I'm signing off. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. Bye, Alex. Take care.
Bye.